Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Empowered Modern Witches show. It's been a little while since I did a solo episode, and we have a couple more for you before the end of this season. So, something that we're talking a lot about inside my programs, inside the Starlight Coven Inner Circle, something we're talking a lot about this year is manifestation. So, manifestation, manifesting, right, is a very buzzy word, I know. But I think it's really, in many ways, to me, just another word for making magic, right? It's another word for creating, for directing our will, right? You can use magic, witchcraft, manifestation pretty much interchangeably. And so we're going to talk about 5 steps that I recommend you go through, that you work with to manifest your most magical life. And these are definitely some of the steps that I've used to manifest mine, to manifest my most magical life. So we're going to talk about some really clear, really actionable things that you can do, because I think that this idea of manifestation gets really misconstrued in a lot of spaces, right? We have this tendency to think that manifesting is somehow just, imagining what we want and sitting back and receiving it, which in some spaces, right, people are really leaning into that and being like, yeah, you can have whatever you want as long as you can imagine it, even, or even better, universe, right? Even better than what I can imagine. And that's it. You don't have to do anything. There's a lot of privilege baked into that, right? There's a lot of assuming that everything is just going to go exactly your way and come to you. And that is a really powerful belief to hold. And it's also a very privileged belief, right? It's also a belief that allows us to kind of assume that the universe is on our side. Maybe the universe is on our side. I like to think it is, but it also kind of assumes that society is on our side, which isn't always the case, right? In fact, for a lot of people, for a lot of us, especially for women, for people of color, for LGBTQ plus folks, the society isn't necessarily on our side, isn't necessarily rooting for us, right? And so there's a lot of like really problematic shit that shows up in the manifestation space, right? Where we're just like, oh, it's just dreamy, and we can just, as long as we can picture it, it can come into our lives. And I really do believe in so many ways that that is true. And it's not the whole story, right? It's not the whole picture. On the flip side, something that I think is just as problematic is people who think that all of that, being able to do that to any extent is complete hocus, like not real, is really, damaging for people, to give people that kind of hope, right? And I think that's total bullshit, right? We have so much power to create and to quote unquote manifest our lives and to manifest what we want, right? We have so much power. And so I think both of these are really kind of a misrepresentation of what manifesting, of what magic really is, because it's not all energy, right? It's not all just imagining and like the dreamy affirmations and, everything I want is going to come to me just because I want it. And so much can come to us just because we desire it, right? As long as we are in alignment, as long as our desires are truly what we want, as long as they're coming from within, as long as they're intuitive, and as long as we are backing them up with the action, right? And that is the most important part. And that is one of the things that gets really lost in translation, right? Is it's not just the affirmations, it's not just the visualizations, it's not just, putting it out there into the universe and saying, okay, universe, give me everything I want. It's about co-creating with the universe, right? It's about saying, okay, this is the energy, this is the frequency I'm going to show up with, and this is the action I'm going to take, right? Like the really simple example that, you sometimes hear when people are having this conversation is, if you want a new job, you're not just going to say, okay, universe, give me a new job, I'm ready for it, and not send in any resumes, right? Not fill out any applications. We have to, there's got to be real world 3D practical action as well. And so I think there's a lot of ways that what manifestation is gets really misrepresented, really screwed up, because manifestation, literally, the word is just bringing something that is intangible, right? Something you can imagine, something you can visualize, something you desire into reality, making it manifest, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about that from the lens of the myth of Athena, which is really interesting, actually. So, manifesting is really quite literally just making whatever it is you want real, right? And I think there is something to be said for, if we can picture it, if we can visualize it, if we can imagine it, we can make it real, right? I think that one of the really problematic things, however, that comes into this is that we then tend to say, okay, well, if what I imagine, what I say, what I put out there is going to become real, then everything I say is going to become real. And if I have a negative thought or I imagine something bad happening, I manifested that thing. No, absolutely no, right? Number one, I think we have incredible power. I don't actually think we have that much power. I don't think we have the power to create literally everything that happens to us. And this goes right back to the issues of privilege and the things that are just really problematic about saying that, everything I speak comes into existence, because we do not manifest the bad things that happen to us. I did not manifest my house burning down. Okay. I did not manifest my relationship that I thought I was going to be in forever blowing up. Are there things that happened that led to those events? Yes, of course. But I didn't create them, right? I didn't, put out the wrong frequency and have a bad vibe and make those things happen to me. Just as whatever bad things have happened in your life, you did not create them, right? You did not manifest them. So manifestation is making whatever is intangible, whatever we desire, real, right? Making it physical. And we have a lot of power to speak and dream our desires, our magical lives into existence. But we do not have ultimate power, right? And we cannot create, and we do not create everything that happens to us. Okay. So I hope that's a helpful kind of definition of what manifestation actually really is. So, and right, manifestation is pairing the energy and the dream and the affirmations with the practical action. Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you 5 different practices to manifest your most magical life. Okay. So the first thing, and these first two are actually kind of interchangeable in terms of like which one actually comes first. I think they're actually more of they're more dynamic than that. Like we go back and forth between these in this process. Okay. But number one is to clear our limiting beliefs. So this basically means that we start to be aware of the ways that we are actually blocking what we desire from coming into our lives. Okay. So what happens is we say, oh, I want that new job, right? And that's actually a really good example, because that's in terms of how I manifested my magical life. That was a big one for me. So let's use that as our example, right? Like, okay, we say, okay, I want that new job. And maybe we do start putting the resumes out there, right? We're co-creating, we're telling the universe what we want, we're taking the practical actions, and still nothing is happening. Okay. So what happened for me with this is about actually more than that, like 6+ years ago, which seems crazy. I decided about 6.5 years ago, I decided that I was ready to move on from my job. So I had this really incredible full-time job. I was making really good money, especially for how young I was. I was in my early 20s, and I loved my job. I loved what I did. I was an events manager. But I knew I was burning out. I knew I was fried. I was tired. I was really getting run down. And as much as I loved my job, I also knew it wasn't my passion. Okay. It was a job I kind of ended up in. And I wouldn't change that. I'm glad I had that job for the experiences and the relationships, absolutely, that came out of it. But I knew I was fried. And my degree is in art. And so I really wanted to go back into the art world. And so for literally a year and a half, I guess about a year plus, I was submitting resumes. I was doing interviews. I interviewed for, I swear, every remotely art job in the 1 to 2 hour radius of me, basically. And in many cases, I had really excellent references. I had references from like people who knew the people at the organization I was applying for. I had friends at the organization. Like I was so set up. I should have been able to get any one of these jobs. I was so overqualified for so many of them. And in most cases, I wasn't even getting interviews. And even when I was getting interviews, in fact, I had one interview in particular where I knew the woman interviewing me, and she said to me, like, I'm not going to hire you for this. You're totally qualified, and I know you do a great job, but it's not what you're supposed to be doing. I don't know what you're supposed to be doing, but it's not this. And I was like, oh my God, you're killing me. Like, what do you mean this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing? This is what I got my degree in. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And what I hadn't really realized is that I was trying to just, take the job that I had been doing that was burning me out and, do the exact same job or something really similar, just in a different industry, right? Instead of doing it in tourism, I wanted to do it in art, and I would have just been just as burnt out. I ended up getting, like, the long story short of this is I ended up getting an art job. I worked for an art center for about a year and a half. That within weeks of me starting that job, I knew it was a mistake, and I knew that I was not going to last there because it was not a good environment. And it was one of those things where, like, I needed to see that for myself. I really needed to see, like, oh, I'm just repeating a pattern, right? I just have this belief that this is how I'm supposed to make a living, is doing this kind of work that is actually not very good for me, right? That's really too stressful for me, and isn't actually what I'm passionate about, right? I loved the business owners that I was working with doing events, right? The restaurant owners and the the winemakers. I loved that. I thought the work they were doing was so incredible. I loved working with the artists for the art events that I then went on to work on. Loved working with the artists, uplifting them and getting their work out into the world. I loved that. But it wasn't my, like, ultimate passion, right? It was the difference between, like, what am I, like, deeply passionate about versus what am I good at and I enjoy, right? And a lot of times, the vast majority of us, we end up in jobs and in situations with the latter, right? Or worse, right? We end up doing something we actually hate. But a lot of people, where we really get stuck is, I'm good at this work, I like it, so therefore it's what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Not necessarily. And so for me, the belief was that that's what I was supposed to be doing, right? That's how I needed to make a living. I had the Loop and Hollow blog already at that time. And in fact, by the time I started at the art center, I had already made some, a little bit of money, not a crazy amount of money, but a decent amount of money, selling my online courses and things for about 2 years prior. And so I had seen that, like, this was a viable business, but I had absolutely no faith that it's what I was meant to do with my life. Until I went through some, like, major health crises, and the universe sort of sat me down and was like, okay, you're not listening. This is what you're supposed to be doing, right? And so, to circle back here, right, the step here is to clear these limiting beliefs, to see where we're sabotaging ourselves, right? So for me, I was sabotaging myself because I was trying to recreate the same thing that was already burning me out, just in a different industry, right? And I was sabotaging myself um by basically saying that, like, that was practical, right? That's what made sense because it's what my degree was in, it's what my experience was in, it's what I was good at, it's what I was known for. Versus, quitting my job and going and getting an astrology certification and doing astrology readings and writing books about witchcraft. Like, that was left field, right? Nobody saw that coming, except maybe a few people really close to me. And so clearing these limiting beliefs is really, in many ways, the first step to getting where we're going, right? Because a lot of times the next step is really important too. And like I said, we kind of go back and forth between them. But I think sometimes we can't even get to the next step until we've noticed where there's an issue, right? Where we've noticed that, like, oh, I say I want that thing, but I'm doing this other thing instead, right? Because where I was doing that in this case is I was always saying, like, oh, I'm always going to do work that I'm really passionate about, or I'm always going to do work I enjoy. And I wasn't, right? I mean, I liked my job, but I was so burnt out, right? And so therefore something needed to give. Okay. a couple other examples of limiting beliefs that could come up here. One for me was definitely like releasing the idea or the assumption that I can't make a living as an astrologer and a professional witch, right? That like, even though I had proof that, I'd made sales and this was a viable business, just feeling like that wasn't practical, right? Like that just couldn't be. Which is very much a societal idea, not an idea from me, right? Also, and this is a big one for so many of us, is this kind of imposter syndrome, right? Is I had to release the idea that like I didn't know enough or I hadn't been practicing long enough, right? When I first started doing online courses, I had been practicing for, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years, but I had a 2-year break in the middle of that. So I really only had a couple years of practicing under my belt. Granted, I would say I've been practicing all my life, but not like officially, right? And so I had big imposter syndrome for a long time, that I didn't know enough about astrology, that I hadn't been practicing long enough, that I hadn't seen enough clients, all the things. And obviously this is kind of specific to work and business, but it comes up in so many things we might want to be manifesting, right? That like, we're not the kind of person that goes on that trip and does that kind of traveling. We're not we don't have enough experience to write that book and actually sell it and have people buy it, right? So clearing out these limiting beliefs that are telling us, or rather that we are telling ourselves, we can't actually have what we want. Okay, so number 2, the second one here that I said these kind of go back and forth, is the visualizations, right? So my preferred visualization for manifesting is a future self visualization. This is a very simple concept, okay? So basically, you're going to, come into a meditative space, have some quiet, maybe have music on, maybe not, do some meditating, do some breathing, etc. Whatever you do to get grounded and come into that meditation. And then we're just going to visualize your future self, right? So sometimes I'll do this, 6 months out or 5 years out or 10 years out. And basically the way I like to do this is to imagine, close my eyes, imagine that it's completely dark around me. And then that there's like a fuzzy screen in front of me that starts to slowly become visible. It slowly starts to become clear, and the screen like starts to fill my field of vision until I like step into the scene. Okay. So that's kind of how I like to like enter this space. Or the other way I like to do this is to actually do like a day in the life visualization, where I close my eyes, I imagine it's dark, and then I imagine that I'm opening my eyes, I'm waking up in a morning in the future, in my own self, right? And I'm going about my day. I've done some very powerful visualizations about that, some of which has become very real. And some of which I always wonder, like, well, I don't think that thing is going to happen, but it was really clear in that picture. So I don't know, it could be. That could still happen, and I'll just be really shocked about it in the future. So, sometimes these are like visions, right? Where it's like, this is your future. And sometimes we're just feeling it out and we're imagining like, what is possible here, right? What is going to happen? So the reason why I say that the clearing the limiting beliefs and doing the future self visualizations kind of go back and forth is because, one, I think often we can't quite picture our future. We can't picture our future selves until we've cleared some limiting beliefs, right? Because we might just simply not believe it, right? It might be like, yeah, sure, that future version of me lives in this dreamy cottage and, doesn't go to work until 11 a.m. and gets to have a slow morning sipping her tea and whatever, right? Sure, that's going to happen. We just don't believe it. And so if we can clear some of those limiting beliefs first and then do our visualizations, we're much more open to like, oh, this is a real possibility, right? This is a life that not only I want, but that I can create, right? But we then, I think, sometimes go back, right? We do the future self visualization, and then maybe we realize some more limiting beliefs that could still be in the way, right? Because the limiting beliefs are usually things that are so deeply ingrained, we don't even realize that, one, they're there, and two, they're not real, right? That they're not true. Probably because we've told them to ourselves and society has told them to us so many times. And so I think kind of the ideal way to do this is to like really look at your life, look at the beliefs that you're telling yourself, look at the things where you're like, I don't like this, right? I don't like my job, or I don't like how much money I'm making, or I don't like my relationship, or I don't like that I'm not in a relationship, or whatever. And okay, I say I don't like that, but what am I doing that supports having it to be this way, right? What beliefs do I have that tell me it has to be this way? Clearing some of those, doing the visualization practice, and really starting to like look forward and picture like, okay, if it doesn't have to be this way, how can it be? What is actually possible? And then going back and saying, okay, if that is possible, what more beliefs do I need to pull out of the weeds, right, that are going to keep me from getting there? And I think we go back and forth on this journey, right? Okay. Number 3 is to basically keep reaffirming the same goals over and over. And I have 2 really big caveats to that. So we tend to have, right, manifestation can be little things, right? Oh, I manifested a free lunch. Awesome, right? Like, hell yeah. Or I manifested my house, right? Those are 2 very, very different ends of the spectrum. So we tend to like manifest little things and manifest huge things. I find that's often like, sometimes there's some middle ground, but usually it's like little or big. And so the big goals might not happen right away, right? You might say, hey, I want a free lunch, universe, and make it happen tomorrow or today, right? That might happen. But you're probably not going to snap your fingers and have a house. Now, I will say sometimes the big stuff does happen quickly, and it absolutely can. It absolutely can. Massive transformation can happen literally overnight. And I have experienced that. And maybe manifesting a house overnight is a bad example because I've done that twice. As some of you have heard those stories about me manifesting houses very quickly. But, right, generally speaking, the big things don't usually happen overnight, and we shouldn't expect them to, right? We can expect that it's possible, but not expect that they have to, right? That we did something wrong or it's not working just because it didn't happen instantly. Sometimes we might be manifesting something for weeks or months or years. And here's my caveats to this, right? Is we don't want to let the goals get so boring that we tune them out, right? Where it's like, yeah, I've wanted that for so long. I guess it's not going to happen, right? And I guess sort of similarly, we also don't want to let them not coming to fruition yet mean that they won't, right? So we don't want to tune the goal out and be like, yeah, I've been saying I want that for 3 years and it's still not happening. And we don't want to say, I've been saying I want that for 3 years, so I guess it's not going to happen, right? We don't want to let them get boring, and we don't want to let a longer period mean they won't happen. So how do we keep reaffirming the same goals without doing either of those? So the reason why I bring this up is because I have a couple of goals, a couple of business goals, a couple of money goals that have been on my list for literally years. I go back to old journals sometimes and I'm like, shit, 2021, I was still writing that thing down. Still hasn't happened, right? Or I go back to old journals and there are things that I thought were going to happen in my life that very much are not going to happen in my life, especially in terms of my relationship. So things that I assumed were going to just play out naturally that are never going to happen, at least not with that person. And so sometimes when we have these like old goals that didn't happen, right, or that haven't happened yet, we get kind of like, well, I guess it's not working. I don't know why, I can manifest this thing. I can manifest a house out of thin air, but I can't manifest that thing over there, right? And so reaffirming the same goals means finding ways to keep them exciting. Okay. And knowing that sometimes they are going to get a little boring and they are going to get a little stale, but that we have it within our power to say, okay, I noticed that I'm like kind of bored with this. Is it because I no longer actually want it? Or is it because I need to mix up what I'm doing? I need to mix up my perspective. I actually pulled this card from the Moonology deck this morning, the change your tune card, right? In fact, I've pulled it a couple times this week. I've been kind of in a bad mood. I needed to change my tune. And so sometimes we need to, right? Sometimes we need to change it up. We need to change the stories that we're telling ourselves. But I think that keep reaffirming those same goals is still really good advice, because sometimes something just took longer to pan out, right? We needed to learn something or grow in some way or be the next version of ourselves in order to make it happen. And I think that a lot of times we give up way too early, right? And I do see this so much in business. I know like we're not only talking about work and business here, but I see so many incredible creative people start businesses and think it's going to happen overnight and then totally throw in the towel because it didn't happen overnight. And I know that that is also a privilege in some ways. I mean, I built this business on credit cards, to get started, right? So I get that. But at the same time, I think that we lose out, right? Creative, amazing business owners lose out, and the world loses out on their creativity because we give up, right? We throw in the towel and we say, well, it didn't happen. Well, it's not going to work, right? And there's a certain degree of like intuitive knowing here, right? Sometimes something's not working out because it's not meant for us, right? Like my art world job. But I think we have to really tune in and not make that assumption before, throwing in the towel. Okay, number 4, our 4th step to manifesting your most magical life is to talk about it, okay? To share your dreams, share your goals, get in community, let other people help you raise the energy around your goals, okay? Talking about your goals and saying, this is what I'm going to make happen is insanely powerful, okay? It is one thing to say it as an affirmation in the mirror. It is one thing to write it in your journal. It is another thing entirely to say it to another person, okay? And I have infinite examples. Like I can't even give you examples because there's so many. Okay. I have so many examples where when I've started to actually affirm something to someone else, especially when you affirm it in a really positive way, right? Where you're like, yeah, this thing is happening. Not just like, well, this is really what I want, but I don't know. I don't know if it's possible. I've been wanting it for so long and it's still not happening, right? No, that's not the vibe, right? And it doesn't mean we bypass, right? We ignore the fact that maybe we're a little bummed it hasn't happened yet, right? We get to feel those things and we get to talk about them, right? We even get to like, with the people close to us, we get to be like, God, it really fucking sucks that this thing hasn't come to fruition yet, right? But then we got to flip it on its head and not stay there. And I can tell you, I am so guilty of this. I am so guilty of staying in that pit. Okay. Believe me. But it's when we get out of that pit and we start saying, this is what's happening. This is what I'm creating. This is what I'm manifesting. This is what's going to happen this year. This is what's going to happen this month, etc. That is when the magic really, really, really happens. Okay. There is a reason that making magic with other people, gathering in a coven space, whether it's your 2 best friends or in a huge, coven ritual or online, doesn't matter. Gathering with other people and raising that energy together and carrying each other's goals together is so, so powerful. Okay. So talk about it, talk about your goals. And, I know that there is a lot of, sometimes conversation and advice out there about like, don't tell everyone everything, right? Like let some stuff be secret, let some stuff be a seed within you, especially around magic and in the magical community. And I don't disagree with that. I think sometimes there is power in being like, this thing is happening and I'm not ready to tell anybody yet, right? But I think that it pretty much only works when we're in that energy, when we're like, I'm so excited to like have this really juicy secret that I'm not sharing yet, right? Versus like, oh, I'm not going to tell anybody about this in case it doesn't happen, right? Those are 2 very different vibes. Okay. Now, our 5th step is something a little bit different, but of course you expect it from me, is to look to your astrology chart. Okay. So your manifestation style, how you most naturally manifest and call things in, is in your astrology chart. There are 3 main things I like to look at for this. So the first, remember I mentioned Athena at the beginning of this episode. So the first is an asteroid. So the asteroid Pallas, which is an epithet of Athena. So you can think of this as the asteroid of Athena. Pallas is the asteroid of manifestation. And a big part of the reason for that is because of the myth of Athena's birth. Okay. So the idea of manifestation, right, of being able to picture something and it coming out into the world, a big way that that is represented in mythology is through Athena's birth. So Athena doesn't have a mother, right? And a lot of the gods and goddesses are, their origin stories, their birth myths they're not necessarily born from a mother and father, right? Like Venus is born from the sea foam, right? But she does have a mother and father, and it's slightly more complicated than that. Athena is kind of unique. Athena doesn't have a mother at all. The myth goes that her father Zeus um, imagined her, spoke her into existence, and she sprang forth fully formed, is usually the phrase. She sprang forth fully formed from his forehead. Okay. This is a literal, right, example of manifestation. It's a literal description of like he pictured her and she came forth into the world. She was made manifest. And so Pallas is the asteroid of manifestation. So the sign and house that you have this asteroid in your chart is going to tell you a lot about how you manifest. It's going to tell you about, how you do this, how you picture what you want and bring it into reality. Okay. So the sign and house that you have Pallas is your manifestation style. But I also like to take it even a little bit further and look at your Venus and your Mars. Okay. So Venus, and in fact, we look at Venus for two things. Okay. So we go to Venus, then Mars, and back to Venus. So first we look at Venus for what do you desire? Okay. What is it that you want? What is your most magical life? And this is something I hear a lot, that people feel like, well, I want to manifest things, but I don't even really have clarity on what I want, right? Which, okay, we go back to number one, we start to clear those limiting beliefs, right? Because there's something blocking you from knowing what you want. And believe me, I get it. Like, I am super clear on some goals. And then there are other areas of my life where I'm like, don't know what I want. Okay, probably have to dig into that, but not today, right? So I get it. I get it. We don't all have perfect clarity all the time on everything. But we go back to those limiting beliefs and we start to see, what do I actually want? What do I actually desire? And something that is going to point you in the right direction is the sign and house that you have Venus in. Okay. Because Venus is, in some ways, I think you can think of Venus as your most natural state. Venus is what like our most natural human state, right? She's what we want. She's what we want to experience and do and receive and be, right? So look at Venus for what do you desire? Then we look at Mars. Okay, the sign and house that you have Mars in your chart, this is how you create, how you take action, how you go out into the world. Okay, so really Mars and Pallas together is how you manifest, how you create what you want. Okay, so you can look at both of them, both signs, both houses, put those energies together. That's going to give you a lot of insight on what types of manifestation tools and techniques you want to do. Do you want to do tapping? Do you want to do affirmations? Do you want to play with a manifestation box? Do you want to do visualizations? Do visualizations totally not work for you, right? Like Pallas and Mars together in your chart is going to help you really understand that. And if you have like Mars in Aries and Pallas in Capricorn, it's like full steam ahead, make the plan, do the things, go after the goals, right? Like that's how you manifest. Versus I have Mars in Cancer, and I believe my Pallas is in Pisces, both water signs, right? The way that I manifest, and water signs and air houses, the way I manifest is through talking about it and feeling into it and like being really intuitive, right? So a big part of manifestation for me is the energy, right? It's less about the action, it's about the energy, and it's about the community. Okay. Then we go back to Venus, because a lot of times where we go wrong with manifestation is we say, okay, universe, we're co-creating, we're doing the thing. This is what I want. This is the action I'm going to take. The rest is on you, right? Okay, great. Perfect. But then we just keep taking the actions. We don't ever actually hand it back to the universe. We keep worrying about it and stressing about it and wondering if it's going to happen and how it's going to happen and when it's going to happen, right? We try to control it and we need to know how it's going to work, right? And it doesn't ever work because we're holding on so tight to it. Venus can really help us with that, because not only is Venus what we desire, Venus is also how we receive. Okay. So after we take the actions, we have to sit back. We have to make space. We have to be open to actually receiving the thing we said we wanted, right? And so Venus is going to not only help you figure out what you want, but is also going to help you to understand, how do you sit back? How do you create space? How do you open up and say, okay, I did the things and now I trust that it's happening. Okay, so the sign and house that you have Venus in is actually a really powerful and important part of manifestation. Really kind of the energy part, right? You can think of Venus as the receiving and the dreamy energetics, and Pallas and Mars as how do we make it happen? How do we create it? So definitely go and look at those in your chart. I think that you may find them really interesting. Mine is super backwards, right? So my Mars and Pallas placements are both water signs. My Venus is in Aries and she's retrograde. I think the reason why I'm talking about this, really why I'm really passionate about this topic, is because it's something that actually doesn't come very naturally to me, right? Like manifestation, and I've always been able to like visualize what I want and then make it happen and do it. And I've always been able to like do this future self thing and be able to see like, okay, I know what's coming in the next year. I know it's coming in the next 3 years. There's been a few curveballs that I didn't see coming, but we don't foresee everything. I'm not like 100% psychic all the time. But what's really hard for me is it's not just staying in the like hustle hamster wheel action mode, right? Taking my hands off the wheel, letting the universe take control, really letting that co-creation happen, and really opening up to receive. That part is hella hard for me. Okay. And that's definitely in my chart. Because the energy work actually feels like action to me. And taking the action kind of feels like what I'm supposed to do to receive, but that's a limiting belief, right? That's something I need to untie and shed. So I hope this is helpful for you. I hope this is interesting to dig into your chart. So just to kind of recap, right? Number one, to manifest your most magical life, number one is clear those limiting beliefs that are, sabotaging what you say you actually want. Do some future self visualizations, feel into what do I actually want? What is possible? Keep reaffirming those goals. Don't give up on them. Mix them up if they start to get stale, but don't give up on them. Talk about your goals, talk about what you're manifesting, let other people help you raise energy, and look to Venus, Mars, and the asteroid Pallas in your astrology chart to help you understand your unique manifestation style. Okay. I would love to hit me up on Instagram, or I think if you're on Spotify, you can like comment on this episode or something. And tell me, what are you manifesting? Let's raise that energy together. I would love to hear how this resonates with you. And if this is something that you're really excited about getting more support around, if you've been struggling with any of these things, feeling like you struggle to follow through on your manifestations, you give up too early on them, or you aren't really sure what it is that you want, you don't have that clarity, or you worry, you stress, you hold on too tight, right? If you're struggling with any of these, then you are going to love an event that I am hosting. So it's called the Manifest Your Magical Life Virtual Retreat. It's happening June 12th to 14th. 2024. And this is a members only event for members of the Starlight Coven Inner Circle. So to attend the event, you just need to come and join us in the membership. We have a bunch of different options for you. You can join on a monthly plan and stay as long as you want, or cancel anytime, or you can do a 12-month commitment and you get a discount. So lots of flexible options for you. And the event is not just going to be me. We're going to have, I think it's 6 guest speakers who are going to be not only doing, lectures and presentations on different ways to manifest, manifesting with tarot cards and journaling, but we're also going to have a lot of really immersive experiences as well. So we're going to have a tea ceremony to awaken your inner magic. We're going to be having some like movement practices and visualization practices and Reiki to help you clear blocks. It's going to be absolutely incredible. And not only obviously do you get to attend the event, but you'll also have access to everything in the membership, which is really incredible. You get weekly live calls. We have workshops and coaching calls and rituals. You get to be in our private community 24/7. You get tons of access to me to ask about your practice and your chart. We do what do? We do so many things. Daily text messages and weekly emails, tons of resources to help you stay on track with your manifestations, with your spiritual practices. And you even get one-on-one private coaching calls with our team of support coaches who I have trained myself. So it is a really special space. And if you join before the event starts. So by June 11th, you're going to get to come and join us for the Manifest Your Magical Life virtual retreat to really delve into all of these. And in addition to all of our speakers, of course, I will be leading live sessions too, really digging into some of these. So we're going to be looking at Palace in your chart. We're going to be doing a visualization together, doing a ritual. It's going to be really incredible. So we'll put the link for the event and for the membership in the show notes. I hope that you come and join us. It is going to be really such a special couple of days together and beyond, because you're going to get that ongoing support to really talk about what you're manifesting in community. So come and join us, and let me know in the comments or on Instagram or wherever you are, wherever you find me, what are you manifesting? What are we calling in?